is the first video in a series on, I'm just going to go over the very basics of making a minimal game using Phaser 2D library. This is for creating games in HTML5 with JavaScript, which is a great way to make games because regardless of what platform you're on, regardless of what hardware you're on, as long as you have a modern web browser, you can play this game. You don't even need to install anything. You can make the games playable offline, so you don't need an internet connection once you've run it. And you can reboot as many times as you want, and the game is still playable without an internet connection. We might get into that later on in the series. Right now, we're just going to work on the basic game. And so, as I said, we're going to be using Phaser, which is a library. Phaser.io is their website. Looks like this, and it is a great resource. You can go to GitHub and fork their project with all their examples. You can click on examples, and they have all these examples broken down into different categories, over 600 altogether right now. But for you guys, I've also set up a GitHub repository. It's called Phaser Minimal Setup. My username is MetalX1000, so if you go to github.com/MetalX1000, or go to my website, filmsbychris.com, that's Chris with the K, there is an option to go to my GitHub account there, and then you can search for Phaser Minimal Setup, or I'll put a link in the description of this video for you. And what this is, it's just has the basic files for you to get you going, and let's just do that and get going. So on GitHub, you can choose to use this to clone it, which is how I would normally do it. But for people who aren't familiar with GitHub, there is a download button here, and you can go ahead and click that. I'm actually going to copy that, and I'm going to go into the folder where I have my web server running, and I'm going to type in wget, and I'm going to download that. You don't have to do this part. You can just click the download button if you don't know how to use wget. And now I'm going to unzip the master zip, and that creates a folder for me called Phaser Minimal Setup-Master. Now I can go over to my web browser here and navigate to where my web server is running on localhost or remotely, and I can then click on Phaser Minimal Setup, and here we go. I have a blank game for you, all ready to go. So let's go ahead and start creating a game. So I'm going to move into that folder, and again, I'm going to be using Vim as my text editor. Use whatever text editor you like. Just make sure it's not a Word document editor. It's very different than a text editor, and it won't work. But you can use gedit, Kate, or whatever Word text document editor you want to use. So I'm going to come in here and let's quickly look. I've created an index.html file for you here. Very, very simple HTML layout. I have the title of the game, which will show up on the tab in the web browser. Then I'm loading the Phaser library here, which I've already downloaded the latest version into this repository for you, so it's already there. And I'll probably keep this repository. We'll try to keep it up to date in the future. And then I'm also linking to a main.js file, which is where we are going to actually write our game. But this is your basic HTML file. I'm not going to type this out bit by bit because hopefully you know basic HTML tags. Now I'm going to Vim into my JS folder and go into my main.js file where I've created a blank template for you here. In fact, I should have removed that, that, and that. I don't know why I left those in there. I'll probably remove that before you download that file. So when you go in, it will look like this. And what this is saying is we're creating an object here called game. And we're going to use our Phaser library. So anytime you see Phaser like this, it's using that Phaser library. And in this case, we're going to create a game. So we're creating an object called game, and we're using the Phaser game function, and we're going to give it some parameters here. We are going to give it a size, and I'm just going to go 1080 by 720. But do whatever you like. If you want a long game or a wide game, portrait or landscape game, depending on whether you're going to be doing this, how you're going to make your game, And this Phaser auto, if I remember correctly, I always type that, but I'm pretty sure that Phaser will check and see if you have hardware acceleration available, in which case it will use WebGL for your game. If not, it will default back to Canvas. Now you can tell it to use WebGL or tell it to use canvas. But if you put auto, Phaser will see which is available and use the best option. Next option here I left blank, but I'm pretty sure that's where you put the scene. That's for larger games. You can have multiple scenes. I'm just leaving that blank for now. Now, here's the most important part here is we have 3 functions that we're defining here. Our preload function, our create function, and our update function. So we're saying for this game, there are these functions, and it's in JSON here, but basically we say preload, and we're going to then, the second half is saying use this preload function. Next, for this game, the create function is called create, which is this function here. And we're saying for this game, the update option is the update function, which we're going to create right here. Okay, so what are these 3 things? Well, when you're creating a game, you don't want your game to start before all your resources have loaded into RAM. So any characters, images, sounds, music, you want to make sure that they're all loaded before the game starts. And that's what the preload function is for. After that stuff is loaded, the next thing it's going to run is the create option, the create function, where you're going to create your basic level and anything you want that loads when the game starts. And then the update is what happens when the game updates. There's actually another option you can put in here called render, which is something, it's like the update, but it happens not just on the update cycle, but on each frame that's rendered. I mainly stick with the update. There's probably instances where you want to use the render, but we're not going to get into that in this series. Let's start with our preload function. So we're going to go ahead and load an image. Now, if you look at the repositories that you downloaded from GitHub, you see there's a RES folder that I created for resources. And in here I have 2 images. I have a brick PNG, which is just a little thing I made, a repeating pattern. I made that in GIMP. And then there's an image of Tux that I downloaded from the internet, which I actually don't know if I have the rights to use this, but there it is. So those are just 2 images I put in there to get you started, but you can load any images you want. You can even load them remotely if they're on another server, but it's usually a good idea to put them on your server to make sure that they load and they don't get moved. So let's go ahead and load up that image of Tux. So what I'm going to say here is I'm going to say game, which is the object we created up here. So if you call it something else up here, you're going to call it something else here. But we're going to call it game. This is our game object. We're going to say use the load function. And what are we loading? You have different options. We're going to load an image. Okay? And then we're going to pass 2 parameters to this function. We're going to say what we're going to call this image in the rest of our script. So anytime we want to load this image of Tux, what are we going to call it? We'll call it Tux in this case. You can call it player if it's your player, but whatever you want to name it there, obviously keep it short, avoid special characters, but whatever you want so that you know what it is. Next, inside quotations, either single or double, we are going to load that image. So where's that image? Well, it's in the same folder, so we're just going to say in the subdirectory. So we're going to say res, so the folder inside our folder, and the image was called tux.png. But of course you would label it whatever your image is labeled. And possibly later on in the series, if you have lots of things you need to load, I'm going to show you how to create a simple little loop that can grab all that stuff. Of course, you're going to probably use server-side scripts. Might get a little out of the realm of these series, but I might show you that later on. So now what's happening is this game loads, so I can save this. I'll come over here to my game, and I'll hit F5. Doesn't look like anything happened, right? We still have our blank game because we loaded our image of Tux into RAM. We downloaded it and made sure it's RAM and ready to go, but we didn't actually put it into our game yet. I'm going to go ahead and hit F12 here. I'm in Chrome. F12 is a very common key, but open up your Developers tab. Whatever the key combination is for your web browser, F12 is fairly common. And if we go to Network here and I hit Refresh, you'll see it loads some things, and you see that it did download the image of Tux. You can even look at the preview here, and there he is. So we did download it. The computer, it's loaded on our computer now locally, but it hasn't been added. I'm very sorry that my phone rang. We haven't put it into our game yet, so let's go ahead and do that. So we've preloaded it, so it's ready to be used. There should be no delay in adding it to our game now. So I'm going to go into our create option here, our create function. Now, there are different ways to load images, and I'm going to show you not necessarily the simplest way right now. Because what I want to do here is I want to actually create a group. So it's kind of like an array. So the reason I'm doing this, I could just add the image there. But since this is going to be our player character, and theoretically later on you might want to add more than one player. So you could have a static one image or animated sprite that is a player. But if you later on you think you might want to add multiple players, you're going to want to have it in a group. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to say players. I'm going to call this players. And it's going to be my group. We're going to say game. So again, let me make this full screen here. We have our game object that we created at the top. So we're going to say create a group from that object, and we're going to add the group. So this side's saying we're creating a new group, and what are we calling this group? We're calling it players. So this way we can now start creating our player. But instead of creating our player in the create function itself, because if you create everything in there, like put all the code for the player and then all the code for everything else in the create function gets kind of big. So I'm going to split it off into another function. And I'm going to call that create player. You can call it whatever you'd like, but I'm calling it create player. So now we're going to create that function. Function create player. So now we're going to put everything we need to create our player in here. So let's go ahead and do that. What we're going to do is we're going to say var. So this is a local variable, so it's only going to work inside this function. We're going to call it player. Now note we have players up here and player here. They're two different things. I call this one players because that's where all our players are going to go, each individual player. So we're going to say, we're going to create a new object in here. And then basically we're going to say players create and then give it some parameters here. So here we're saying, okay, we're creating a new object and we're going to put it, basically we're creating something inside our players group. And we need to give at least 3 things inside this create function. We need to give it XY coordinates, so where this image is going to be placed, and then what image we want to load. So I'm going to go 0, 0, and then inside parentheses I'm going to say tux. And that tux is this tux here. So this knows that it's looking for an image. So it's going to look through our list of images that we've preloaded and find the one that we labeled tux. So this should be placed in the top left corner of our game. So let's go ahead, save that, and go back to our game here. And refresh, and there is our tux. Now he's kind of hard to see because the background is black. So real quick, let's add in a different background color. Because by default it's going to be black. So let's come up here to our create function, and let's have the first thing we do. We're just going to say, take our game, take this stage that we're in, because again you can have different stages. I can say background, and remember this is all case sensitive, so write it like I'm writing it. Only spell things properly. Background color with a capital C equals, and I think we could probably just do something like blue, and I think it will understand that. Let's see. Apparently not. So the proper way to do it is to give it some hex code, and I already have a hex code down here written for a light blue. Now you can go into GIMP and get these values, but I'm just going to do a light blue here. If I do that and I refresh, there we go. We have a light blue background. You can see our tux much better. Now, we're almost done with this tutorial. One thing I'm going to change in our create player function, okay? So, right here, we're creating a player, but anytime we create a player, it's always going to place it in that top left corner this way. Maybe you want that. Maybe you want players always stopping in the top left corner, even if you create more than one player. But let's go ahead and pass it the variable each time that we want to load it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say x comma y, and here I'm going to place the values of x comma y, and then up here when we create the player I'm going to say 0, 0. So here in the actual game, we're not going to notice any difference. You can see our player's still up there. But if I was to change the variable here, you'll see he'll move over a little bit, over and down. See? So now I can copy this line of create player, and let's go ahead and go 200, and we'll leave that at 10, so they'll both be at the same distance down. Oops, save that. And now if I refresh, we've created two separate players at two different locations. Now in reality, we should put options in here to check if those are undefined. If they're undefined, fine, give them default values. We're not going to do that in this video. In fact, we're done for this video. I'm going to hit F11 here so you can quickly look at all the code. Not a whole lot. We're doing great. We're creating our game here. We're preloading an image. We're changing the color of our background. And then here we're creating a group. And then we're using this function to create two different players. And you might go, hey, why don't you just put this line there? Because we're going to be adding more, because that player needs other values. You might want to issue the player, how much life do they have? You might want to issue different images for different players. We're going to give them some physics. So you want to say, how heavy they are, how fast they move, whether they bounce or not, how much they bounce. We're going to get all into that in coming videos. So I thank you for watching this video, and I hope that you continue watching this series. Someone's going to ask, where's the next video? There's going to be one out every week. So be sure to just subscribe so that you see next week's video, unless you're watching this at a later date, in which case there will be a playlist, hopefully in the description of this video, to where you can watch all the videos in this series. So I thank you for watching. If you like this series, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Now that we got a character loaded, we're going to start having some fun, adding some more things. And as always, I thank you for watching. Please visit filmsbykris.com. That's Chris with a K. There should be a link in the description. There's also a link in the description to my Patreon account. Patreon.com/MelX1000. If you'd like to come and financially support me there with as little as $1 a month, I would appreciate it. If you can't do that, which I understand not everyone can, be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment. That really does help. It gets me more views, and although I'm not a millionaire, I do make a little bit of money on ad revenue. I thank you for watching, and thank you for sharing, and as always, I hope that you have a great day.
Thank you for watching our video. Please take a moment to visit our website by clicking on the link below. We'll see you there.